Honestly, if, and this has been said many, many times, if the technology is not reflective of the larger population, it's going to have bias.
So today we're talking with Laura Montoya. She is a scientist and engineer turned serial entrepreneur and startup advisor. She's also the founder and managing partner of Accel Impact Organizations, which includes the Accel.AI Institute, Latinx in AI, and the Research Collab Network. Welcome. We're really excited to talk with you today.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Laura, thanks for joining us. To start with, you work in an interesting space where you have expertise in the technical aspects of AI and ML, but also work in the social aspects around how people interact with it and how it affects society. I wonder, when was your first exposure to AI and what was that about?
That's a funny question. I feel like now that I better understand what AI is, I had exposure from a young age, right? Being able to utilize a computer and really being able to even just play with little like robots and go to science museums. That's something I did from very young, but I didn't have that conceptualization of what AI was, right? I didn't understand its potential power and scalability and the impact that it could have on the world. But I would say that the idea of a robot or something that potentially you can interact with that would mimic a person or another entity, because I was really into animals when I was young. I think that was something I was very drawn to as a child. And it was something that I felt, that I could really connect with, even, my toys and the robots in general. So I would say that as I grew into adulthood, I found that I drew from that experience as a child and my love of, these, that you could call them inanimate objects, but when you're a kid, you breathe life into them, right, through your imagination. And as time has gone on, and obviously the technology has gotten better, now you have these robots that actually are very lifelike, right? One of my favorites actually sits on my desk, and I can show them to you. It's Cosmo. I'm sure you guys are familiar with him from Anki, and they have a new one out now, Vector. But this, I think, to me personally, was one of the greatest innovations because of the way that they animated his face, right? And it allows children really to connect with something that otherwise, would just be a toy. And the way that it breeds excitement and the way that it brings joy. And so for me personally, that's something that, I've taken into my career now and my understanding of AI and how I want AI to really live in the world, right? I want it to be something that people can connect with, that they can appreciate, that can help them, that can solve problems. And I think that that's something that's been missing in a lot of ways from the conversation around artificial intelligence so far.
I would love to hear you talk about, this notion of demystifying AI. What is this program and kind of, what you're doing with it and why it's important?
Oh, of course. So the Demystifying AI Symposiums is a program that we started with Accel.AI Institute actually from the beginning about 6 years ago. And the goal was really to help people better understand what AI is and how to apply it in the real world. And that was a time when all of the hype around AI wasn't really there yet. We didn't have all of these free courses that are available now through Coursera and Udemy and even, better courses like through Udacity and so on. And so I think there had been a winter in AI prior to that. And so we were at a place where people were just trying to figure it out and say, okay, well, what is this technology and how can I use it? And would it actually make my company better? Would it make my products better? And, how can I, basically ride this wave, right? And so for people like me and more of the underrepresented communities that we work with, I really saw this as an opportunity to help people get into the space, right? To provide education and ensure that once AI technology is applied and marginalized populations will have to transition their work, that they would also have that opportunity to reskill and move into that new economy. And so the goal really of these symposiums is to ensure that people get that exposure. And so what we did is we actually hosted sessions which were weekend long to begin with, and we would invite people from the academia, from industry, basically experts in the field to come in and really provide that exposure, and not necessarily from a theoretical vantage point, but really an applied vantage point. The goal was to get people with hands-on experience to really be able to, use scientific packages like Python and then apply that to the Anaconda packages, and then ensure that they could say, okay, if I have one specific project that I want to achieve, how can I take that and actually make it happen using something like TensorFlow or PyTorch, and really utilize computer vision and natural language processing, and then make this a reality. And so that was the goal of these symposiums, is to ensure that someone could have a very small idea, get exposure to people and a hands-on application, and then take that and turn it into something like a portfolio project, and then hopefully also really increase their curiosity and their interest, and then they can continue to learn and grow on their own.
That's great. And it makes me wonder, is there anything that you sort of, learned from doing that work about how to do it well, that you can sort of offer, to others, right? I mean, lots of organizations and companies are also, I think, more and more thinking about these issues, right? How do we make sure that kind of we do create that access to marginalized communities? And I think, there's lots of other programs and people who sort of want to, deliver on that same mission. So what are the things you feel like are important to actually do that effectively?
Oh, of course. I think the key really is understanding where someone is at before they start a program like that, because you can't expect that any program is going to be a one-size-fit-all solution. For us, we realized that a lot of people, especially those that hadn't had any prior exposure, were really starting from a blank slate. Many of them had no prior experience in even software engineering, understanding any of the languages, or really using anything like even a terminal on their computer, right? They were starting from scratch. So they had never downloaded any of the packages or anything like that. So we had to really have a lot of patience and ensure that we were coupling people with the right volunteers and the right mentors, so that they would get that time that they needed to really ramp up from zero. And then from there, we would build them up to the next level. So I think that was the biggest takeaway, is that especially when you talk about AI today and you think about, well, how do you actually do AI? Now, there have been a lot of advances recently with APIs that could allow you to, create something very, very simply in a day, right? Even within a few hours, if you have some technical and prior knowledge and experience. But if you're starting completely from scratch, oftentimes what people would do is really hit their head against the wall on like the simplest issue, right? If something did not download correctly, if they couldn't understand how to write a proper print statement, right? It's people get discouraged. And so for us, we wanted to ensure to be there, to encourage them, to make them understand that, it is worth it and they can't give up just from the first step, and they need to continue on if they really want to achieve this goal. So for us, that was, I think for me at least, my biggest personal takeaway, is ensuring that we meet people where they're at and that we can encourage them so that they continue to go and really achieve the goal that they're trying to achieve, whether that be a simple project, just to experience it, or if they're going to move further and actually study this field and go into a grad program and then become an AI engineer or researcher.
Yeah, it's not just about, imparting the technical skill or knowledge. It's also what I hear you saying, right? I mean, that's important.
Yes.
But it's not just the training, but it's actually sort of, creating that, capacitating people in like a more holistic way where they feel empowered and, feel like they have the ability to learn and grow with the technology.
Of course, yes. And that safe space is, and not just a safe space in that they feel comfortable in doing the work that that they can do and feel like they can do the work, but also that they're surrounded by other people that look like them, right? That are on a similar journey, that are, encouraging them and say, hey, I'm right here with you. And I want to achieve this goal too. And how can we work together and put our minds together to achieve this goal? And I think that is something also that's incredibly valuable. And honestly, that's something I took away from my time working with Women Who Code, because that was a wonderful organization with whom, I'm a director. professor and used to run one of their chapters. And for me, I felt like that time and experience was really key for me when I was first getting into software engineering, right? Being surrounded by other women who, really want to see you achieve and are there for you and show up, every week, right, on, after hours, and really want to help you, like that is so amazing and so valuable of an experience. And really knowing that you can do that with other people and have that, then those networking connections that once you're ready to take that next step and apply for a job and really get into the field, they're going to be there for you as well. So, ensuring that that type of environment is something that we recreated for our members was, really key.
Laura, you mentioned in particular focusing on people who are traditionally underrepresented in tech. To
Yes.
you, why is that important, both for society, but also for the technology outcomes?
Honestly, if, and this has been said many, many times, if the technology is not reflective of the larger population, it's going to have bias. Right. And not only that, it's not going to be something that is, achievable and something that is reflective of the broader community. Right. And if we're going to develop products, if we're going to have things that people can connect with, can engage with, you want them to be able to see themselves. Right. If you have, for example, a smartphone and, all your friends can use, the facial recognition technology to unlock their phone, but you can't, then obviously that technology wasn't made for you. And how does that really make you feel inside, right? That there's this thing that potentially should be available to everyone. At this point, things like smartphones and anything, right? Hand washing, sinks in the bathroom, like these are utilities, right? These are purposeful items. And so if they're not developed in a way that actually works for the broader society and the broader community, then you're hurting people, you're causing harm, and you're making them feel like they're less than, right? It's not really fair to have a world that isn't created for people that are like you, especially when you are representative of a very large part of the population, right? There is absolutely no excuse and no reason why, more thought shouldn't be put into creating these products that will scale and will work for everyone, with having them in mind, and also putting in the time and the forethought to ensure that people from, all different backgrounds, not just in the US, right? We have a very Western cultural lens when it comes to technology, even though a lot of our products are actually developed overseas. And how unfair is that? I think it's really adding to the issues around how the US population tends to capitalize on other economies and other societies, and that we are developing these products and utilizing people from other places to do the work for something that isn't even going to be used by them. I think that is something that we really need to change in this world, and it's unfortunate.
And it's important also, like you said, for people interested in this space or who might be interested in this space to see people like themselves doing this work. How about for you? Have you faced issues personally with not enough people looking like you, and how have you overcome that?
Yes, of course. For me personally, being a Latina, being a woman in this field, when I was first getting started, I didn't see a lot of people, especially in the AI space. When you think about artificial intelligence, you see a lot of, white men with PhDs. They've gone to Stanford, they've gone to Harvard and MIT. And they're the ones that are publishing the research, and they're the ones that are taking on the position of CTO or, AI director within an organization. And, it is hard to look at that. And for someone like me who wants to embody that role, who wants to be that person, and was the first person to graduate from university in my family, I think it's invaluable to have role models that look like you and that you can see yourself in. And so that that's a big reason why I created the Latinx AI organization, is because I wanted to provide that for Latinx people, with not only within the U.S. but also in South America. And I think I personally occupy an interesting space, being a Latinx American, because I can see all sides of that culture and that ethnicity, and oftentimes it can be hard as well, right? Because when other people come from another country and they see you as an American, right? They don't necessarily think that you have the same life experience as they do, and they're absolutely right. My life experience is completely different than their life experience, but that's also why I want to provide that for them as well, and that's also a huge driver of why I started the organization, to ensure that people that come from anywhere, right, whether that be a Latin American, whether that be someone who was born in Mexico or Uruguay or Brazil or Colombia, that they can see someone achieving in this space in the U.S., and not only in the U.S. but in other developed countries as well around the world, that they can compete on in the global market. And so that's part of why we host at these large AI and machine learning conferences, like the Neural Information Processing Systems Conference and the International Conference on Machine Learning, that are often hosted in places like Montreal and Toronto, and in different parts of Asia and Germany and so on, is because we want to ensure that those people have the opportunity as well to get out of their comfort zone, get out of their personal space and the bubbles in which that they're currently working in, and gain exposure and also have representation in those spaces. Because if it's obviously not just with the Latinx population, with the Black population, being a woman in general in those spaces, if you go into that space and all you see are people that don't look like you, it's not very welcoming, and it's not encouraging. And so just like the experience we had with Women Who Code, right, and how that space made me feel safe and welcome, again, that is what I wanted to provide for others. So that's that was a driver for me in creating this part of our org, and it's something that is incredibly valuable to me as well.
I was wondering what important and interesting things are going on in South America that maybe people haven't heard about.
Oh wow, there is so much, honestly, that's happening. It's it's incredible, and it's funny because you don't hear about it as much, obviously, from here. But so what I would say is really amazing are the startups that are now popping up around AI and machine learning as well. And so one of them that comes to mind is Rappi, which is similar to probably what you think of as Uber here, right? And it's a company that basically delivers anything that you need through a phone app. And they have courier services that come in, and basically they use AI and machine learning technology to connect all the couriers to the people that are trying to order these products. And they also want to ensure that they do it in a way that hasn't been done before here. And one of the reasons why it's pretty unique is because they don't drive as many cars in that area. This is in Medellin, in Bogota, in Colombia. And so the delivery often happens by bicycle. It often happens by motorcycle, but still they're able to track these individuals and make sure that products are delivered in a really rapid pace. And so for me, I thought that having that company get so big so fast and then expand to many other countries within South America was incredibly amazing. It's something that I think has actually caused great value, because different remote areas of these countries now are able to receive products and goods that they haven't been able to receive before. And so for me, that's something that we would traditionally think of as very common now, especially in the US, but is not something that they've had for for very long. So it's amazing. And so I think that was something that I thought was really exciting to see from a more product standpoint. But On top of that, if you think about, the medical industry, so in places like Cuba, for example, because I have a lot of friends that actually live and are raised in Cuba, they are quite advanced from a medical perspective. So most of the funding that has gone into technical development within Cuba has been applied to the medical industry. And so they have now been able to use AI and machine learning and apply it for different areas of research when it comes to detecting different kinds of cancers, to solving treatment problems that they wouldn't necessarily have had before. But they are doing it in a way that uses what we would consider as limited technology, right? They do basically what's called AI on the edge, because a lot of the processing is just handled through your smartphone, right? And then it sends the imaging data through the cloud. And so because they don't have the resources to necessarily purchase these large X-ray machines, and they wouldn't necessarily have the servers available to them to actually send all of this data and do the processing themselves through large servers that we would normally host through Amazon or through Google Cloud services here in the US. So just seeing that type of advancement, seeing people and professionals be able to solve these problems using the same ideas, the same theories, the same types of technologies, but apply it in their community, even with limited resources. I think that is amazing, and that is really something that we should be proud of, and that we should speak more about.
So part of it is about, supporting that work, like you're saying, elevating that work, and enabling more people to do it, both, in places like the US and elsewhere. But it's also about sort of getting people in places like, the US or Europe or Canada to pay attention, right, to what's going on in some of those places. So like I said, this may be a tough question to answer, but just curious for your thoughts about how do we do that, right? How do we get the people, kind of who are in these positions of power, and influence in places like the US to really pay attention and be open to learning from what's happening in Cuba or Colombia?
Yeah, of course. So a lot of that is the work that we're doing as an organization, right, is to provide that representation and get others to pay attention. So part of it is ensuring that these people are in the same place and time, right, that they have the opportunity to speak in a way that allows for collaboration and exchange of ideas, and really that opens their minds up to the fact that there is a broader world out there, right, and that people are doing this work and driving innovation in places that you wouldn't necessarily consider otherwise if you didn't have exposure to it. So for us, we think that's first, and that's key, right, is putting people in the right place to really drive those conversations. Otherwise, we really need to ensure that these other researchers from the US and from Canada are paying attention, right, and that they understand, what is what's missing from these different places, and what they can do to make a difference. And so for us, after we surveyed many of our members within Central and South America, we found that one of the key areas of need that was lacking was mentorship, right? So what traditionally happens, because these countries do not have the same types of resources, and their governments do not invest as much within research and development within their countries, people end up leaving. Once they get a master's degree, once they get a PhD, right, the goal is to get out of the country and find a place that will actually pay them more, so that they can have a better lab, they can provide more for their family, and they can get that exposure. And on the one hand, that's amazing opportunity for that individual, and it's great that they were able to make it that far. But also then that still continues to create this vacuum of this lack of mentorship within the country itself, and this basically this brain drain that happens in that area, where all of these very highly educated individuals that are doing this wonderful work are now moving on to other places. And so what we have done as well is created this mentorship program that we offer, where we connect people from all over the world, and specifically people working at very large, very advanced companies. So we have our mentors include people from Google, from Facebook, from LinkedIn, and from Apple, and so on. And we connect them directly with researchers in South America and Central America, so that they can talk about their work, and so that they can gain exposure to people working within the industry. But when you're really considering maybe the people that are not reachable, right? Those that wouldn't necessarily take the time to mentor, or aren't already listening and aren't open to the conversations. I think the key there is just going to be more time and more exposure. So the more we bring people in from different countries that show that they can do this work and have the skills and want to be in this space, and then the more they move up in the community, right? Others are going to have exposure to them, and they're going to see, okay, well, actually people like this are doing the work, right? And it's the same thing, I think, for any minority group.
I wonder if during this pandemic, a number of companies have obviously experimented heavily with remote work, and also this idea that some people maybe feel they don't need to be out near San Francisco. They don't need to be in the Valley anymore. They don't need to be exactly at the home office. And there's been a bunch of talk about smaller cities in the US benefiting from people either going back home or leaving. And I wonder, can you envision that extending to beyond the US and maybe into South America and other places? And how might that happen, and how might that change things?
We think about it's really easy, maybe in the U.S. to, even if you're going to a more remote, state or environment, if you live in the country, that maybe the internet isn't as strong as well, right? This happens in our country also. So, someone from a farm in Iowa potentially wouldn't have that opportunity to do the most advanced machine learning research if they're, sitting at, in that family home, but potentially they could upgrade that home, right, to get to the point where they could do their work. I think that is a little bit more feasible here. In South America, there are very, very remote areas that wouldn't even have that option, right? That you can't just call up your utility company and say, hey, I want to install this. I want to install this gig fiber internet and to ensure that I can to do my job. So I think that it's a little trickier in those cases, and the support infrastructure has to be there first. So there are some grants now that are coming out actually to help provide more stable internet for people within more remote locations in different parts of the world, and I think that that's something that is very valuable. There are a few organizations that are trying to help solve that problem as well, and that will also bring things like laptops and extra computers with them, so that other people in those environments can start gaining access to the internet and to technology in a way that they haven't had previously. So when I envision it happening, I think that it's something that has to be, it's not like an individual can just take responsibility for it. I think that it's something that has to be more of a community-wide, endeavor that potentially the group and the community has to come together to say, well, this is something that we want, and this is something that we're going to work hard to achieve, and they have to then find the proper resources and reach out to the right organizations that will to come in and help them. So I think that that's going to be a larger barrier for people within different parts of South and Central America who are lacking that access for sure.
And Laura, you also, is there anything in particular you want to cover or speak to or share with people?
For me personally, I think that it is invaluable that we continue to support the people that are doing this work, and not just the people that are living in other countries, but also the people that are within our community, right? We have very well-known researchers and engineers that are showing up to work every day, and they're still experiencing bias, and they're still facing basically a marginalization within that community. And it doesn't matter that they have a PhD or they're well published or they're considered a research scientist. For us, it is essential that people that come from different backgrounds are represented within artificial intelligence and machine learning, because this technology has an effect on everyone's lives, right? And there's absolutely nothing in the world almost today that you can touch that isn't going to have AI embedded in it somehow going forward into the future. I mean, there's someone who said recently that I really appreciated, that AI is the next internet, right? And the way that the internet is basically all around us, and it's something that you can't live without at this point. Well, that is going to be AI within the next few years, and it almost is now, right? Between our cell phones, between our smart toothbrushes, right? Like anything really that you touch. And so if that technology is not represented of the broader population of the world, like you're doing people a disservice, you're really causing harm, and that's not okay. And people need to take a step back and really think about, is this the world that I want to live in the future? Is this really the impact that I want to have on society, is to create something that causes harm? And I don't think people really want that. I think, deep down, most people, they just have been inconsiderate, and they haven't been really taken into account the real potential cause of their actions. So I think that's what I really want to leave the conversation with, is kind of that call to action to people to take some time and reflect and really ensure that the work that you're doing does help and doesn't harm others. So
besides your own work, which we'll definitely be sharing, some of these great programs that you've talked about, what are some other resources you would point people to, and whether it's, books or other organizations or people to learn about?
When I was first starting out, honestly, we really just focused on the deep learning book, right? And this is something that is available for free online. And what I really appreciate about this book is that it basically takes you from the intro level mathematics and then allows you to build up from there, because you have to understand that like the basis for all of artificial intelligence and machine learning is math, right? So for people that appreciate that and want to go further into theory and want to publish research and investigate that space, like that would be an amazing resource for them to start with. But now if you're math shy, because I know a lot of people are math shy and they don't necessarily want to jump into linear algebra or calculus or differential equations or anything right from the start, I would say honestly one of the best resources is fast.ai, right? I think that Rachel has done an amazing job putting that course together online, and their videos and resources help people get that a hands-on experience, and again, like just like our Demystifying AI symposiums really help you build projects from the ground up and just get your hands dirty without thinking necessarily about the theory or thinking about the math, and I think that is really great. Other than that, I would say pick a project, right? Like if you're going to do anything, you have to have a goal in mind. And then from there, you have to break it down into small steps and work to achieve that goal. If otherwise, you're going to get overwhelmed, or you're going to lose interest or lose confidence in why you're even studying this, right? Because the world of AI and machine learning is so incredibly vast, and it's changing rapidly every single day, right? If you think about the number of papers that are being published and the different models that are coming out now, it's like every day there's something new. And so if you try to just keep up with that and say, how am I ever going to achieve this, ideal view of, what AI is, or the pace in which the industry is moving, then you may get discouraged. But I would say, don't do that. Just focus on focus on what you want to achieve, right? What problem do you want to solve with artificial intelligence? How can it help you? How can it help your community? I think that is really the key in this case, and there is no other way to approach this problem, right, of getting into AI other than really thinking about your core values.
Laura, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been my pleasure.
This has been, really fascinating and inspiring conversation. Thank you so much for talking with us.
That's a wrap on the interview, but the conversation continues.
And we want to hear from you. Send your questions, ideas, and comments to justdigital.hbs.edu.
You've been watching Pathways to a Just Digital Future,
an investigative project that aims to better understand and address inequality in tech.
This program was produced by the Harvard Business School Digital and Gender Initiatives.
Our team includes
Ethiopia Omari and my cat.
Tanya Flynn.
One more time. Liz Sarli.
Thomas Jamie-dayo.
I'm Dave Homa.
And I'm Colleen Ammerman.
Thanks for hanging out with us.
Keep exploring at justdigital.hbs.edu.